And as we continue to talk about this important electoral day in Venezuela, let's now welcome international law expert Ivonne Tellez, who joins us here from the South to speak more about the importance of this electoral day for Venezuelans. Hello, Ivonne. Welcome to From the South.
Good afternoon. Happy to be here.
It's always a pleasure to have you. Yvonne, what is your take? What is the importance, the significance of this electoral day for Venezuela, with especially, as we were talking previously, the incorporation of the region of Guayana Esequiba that is also voting for the first time for its authorities in this important electoral day?
Okay, well, electoral processes will always be necessary in order to gain and provide legitimacy to the government, to allow the transition uh, processes of political processes, and also to bring people the feeling and the empowerment that they have in order to elect their representatives. So electoral process as one of the principal factors of a healthy democracy will always be needed, in the sense, well, we have to take into account, of course, that the this developments, this electional day is happening within a highly polarized environment. So it shows these ongoing challenges that the country is facing and the democratic institutions are facing. So those are necessary measures in order to provide and restore the legitimacy and the confidence of the voters. Also because these developments, for example, regarding the Essequibo region, underscore the need for a dialogue, for a continued dialogue, and those
They try to intentionally trying to distort the Venezuelan reality of what is happening in Venezuela. That's why calls have been made for people to come. There are over 400,000 international observers right now in Venezuela observing these elections, how they are being developed, and so far they have been saying how good, how transparent the system, the voting system, the machines used, how effective they are. Why do you think there is this constant need to try to slander the voting system in Venezuela?
Okay, well, elections. We have to remember that elections are part of an internal process. That there are international law principles. One of them is the non-interference in international affairs of our countries. In that sense, elections must be held within an independent form because it's an internal issue. That's the first thing in this case. So this is a sovereign internal issue for Venezuelans. However, the demand for recognition of governments uh, allows for international presence to be under this electoral processes within the countries in order to provide and to tend to show, of course, that those are carried out, as you were saying, under very regular processes and very transparent processes. I think that what we are seeing here is unusual rhetoric. There has been a historical um, stand from an historical boycott, in a way, from the international system, from some international powers that have always tried to underscore what has been happening within the country. And this is something that we cannot avoid because this political opinion cannot be avoided. But under international law rules, we have to take into account that these internal processes have to be independent, and if the country is showing that the rules are being followed, I mean, and when I'm talking about the rules, I'm talking about the transparency and the forms of these electoral processes, This is a completely autonomous, independent, sovereign process that cannot be judged by international opinions because this is an internal process. However, recognition and political recognition always tries to boycott or underscore this, but this has I mean, this cannot be seen as a wall or as a wall in order to prohibit or limit the effects of the upcoming results because this is an internal process.
Yvonne, coming to this election day during the week, there were several declarations by the security authorities in Venezuela of the people that have been detained, foreign mercenaries that were trying to enter the nation with plans to carry out certain violent actions or linked to that extremist far right that exists in the country with contacts from abroad, with financing from abroad. Would you consider that the fact that today the election is taking place in peace and tranquility and people have come out in numbers to vote, is this a defeat for that sector that was trying to boycott the election day?
Well, I think that Venezuela has to recognize that under some, I mean, under the political conditions that it has faced over the last 10 years, more or less, this democratic confidence in these institutions has to be restored. And this election is a way to show that people can actually decide the way they want their representatives to carry on the decisions for the country. In the sense, any interference that comes from abroad that tends to diminish and tends to attack or change the results or the environment, or at least tries to bring violent riots or violent responses to this process, has to be avoided because, again, the country has to find its own ways to gain confidence and to decide whatever way it wants to be governed. This is under the principles of international law. As I was saying before, the non-interference of foreign powers within within internal affairs, the the self-determination of states as well. So I think with any external interference that tries to diminish and tries to boycott or affect the internal result has to be avoided. However, what has to be taken into account is how the state avoids this kind of threats, because under the international rules and under the international opinion, some measures can be seen as non-democratic or as normal ways in order to avoid this threat. So this is what has to be taken into account from the Venezuelan part, and I'm talking about the forms and how it approaches these kinds of threats or possible attacks under to its internal and sovereign processes.
You were talking about international rules that should be followed, of course, but how can we describe what happens in reality when we see international organizations act with double standards? For example, in the case of, we stay in Venezuela, all the over 200 Venezuelan migrants that are currently kidnapped and imprisoned in this very harsh detention center in El Salvador that were taken there with any kind of due trial, any due process, and most of them have never even been in El Salvador and currently detained in El Salvador. The treatment that the Venezuelan migrants are receiving in the U.S., for example, and quite recently, the literal kidnapping of a 2-year-old girl, Michaelis, from taken away from the arms of her mother, and the president Nicolas Maduro he said himself that he called Volker Turk, the representative of Human Affairs, and there's been silence. In many cases, this international organization stays silent in certain aspects, and then they are quick to judge in other aspects. Why does this happen? Why is this double standard, and is this a way, because many leaders have said that the current UN system and things like this should be modified or completely changed for something new, to create something, a new multilateral world with a true multilateral international order. Why is this happening?
Well, yes, I agree with you definitely regarding the double standards that have always featured and characterized the international system. We cannot avoid that. Definitely, we are seeing that as you are saying perfectly, there is a demand and there is an interference within the Venezuelan internal processes, political processes, that belongs only to the Venezuelans. And on the other way, we are seeing how people from Venezuela, migrants from Venezuela, are being criminalized, are being stigmatized, and are being treated under without any respect for the international human rights system and the international system. I agree with you definitely. And one of the main principles of it, the international society, is definitely reciprocity. That means that whenever this rule is broken, then you will find the same kind of treatment. But that is not how it has to be done. And in this sense, as you were saying, I think we're facing definitely a kind of a fracture within the international system as how it was built 80 years ago, regarding how the rules were imposed, because we're seeing that the reality right now demands for other different approaches. And that is also, for example, in order to give the voice to other kinds of powers of countries, because the rules, even though they are thought of as being very equitable, they do not apply in the same sense, because they are being applied with this economic and political positions and criteria, not just the rule of law as it has to be applied, that has to be independent from all these political and economic pressures. In this sense, I think what we are facing, and this humanitarian crisis that migrants abroad are facing, and this stigmatization, calls for a very hard and very strong response for the international community, because there's is a non-acceptable behavior from, in this case, the U.S. and El Salvador, who are treating those people as if they were all part of the most powerful gangs of people. And even, and I have to highlight this, even if you have been convicted, or if there are suspicions that any person, any human being is being part of some illegal processes, let's think about that as an exception. You cannot get rid of, or you cannot get, there's no way that a human being can be denied of the complete the recognition of the human rights that we have. And what is happening here is we're seeing torture, is we're seeing human standards being applied to this kind of repression. That this demands for a very high and very harsh response for the international community. And in this case, the Venezuelan state has to be very strong in its demands. And this comes along with, as we're saying, with these double standards regarding how the internal processes have to be respected in an independent way, and how the international community has to respect that, and has to respect the human beings from other parts of the world, in this case, how Venezuelans are being treated.
Yvonne, going back to Venezuela, going back to the region the impact of these regional elections and the legislative elections, how would you describe the impact, I'm sorry to repeat the word over and over, the impact that the results of for the stability, for the economic development will have for this nation, for Venezuela, especially taking into account what happened in 2015 when the opposition sector won the legislative election, but then we saw everything that came after that year 2015 when the opposition was in power of the National Assembly.
Okay, well, I think that the expectations are big regarding how the political internal process of Venezuela restores itself. As I said before, how it restores confidence. For example, the fact that there have been two phases, two ways that the opposition has confronted this electional day. On one way, we have seen that there's a movement that has, and I'm talking about leader Maria Corina Machado. She said, and she has asked for the people not to go to the electional, not to vote, basically. And on the other way, we've seen other faces of the opposition that are participating in this case. Why is this healthy? Because the government and a healthy government needs the plurality of voices. This is part of the nature of politics. This is part of the nature of a government. So if we don't know what the results are going to be, however, let's hope that these results come in a way that show confidence and transparency in order for the people to know that their elections and what they voted for are the representatives that will be recognized as winners of this process. And if this happens in that way, that this is how it's expected, this will show the legitimacy and the plurality of voices regarding a state that of course, needs a lot of a political recomposition of forces in order to show that it can be a healthy environment, a healthy political environment, independent of international forces, independent of international interference, but it has to show and it has to provide the people the confidence that their elections and that their votes have a result. And I think this is the high demand of this day. If this happens, I think we can follow a very, and I'm saying that again and again, I'm talking about healthy, but I think it's the best the adjective that we can use in this case because it will show how effective can those internal forces make a kind of a recomposition of powers in order for a transition, this political transition, leaving behind all these political issues that the country has faced along this 10 years, more or less, this last 10 years.
Yvonne, in your opinion, as an international law expert, what needs to happen for especially abroad, people begin to recognize and what you were talking, the institutionality, the strength of the institutionality?
Well, I think that this has to do with the forms of how Venezuela shows that it's following the democratic and the transparency, I mean, the democratic rules and transparency. I think it depends on the forms. There is a stigma for Venezuela from the international standpoint. So I think that only facts, not narratives, not discourses, but only facts will restore and in a way give back this recognition. But this has to do with time, definitely with time, with facts, and how population within Venezuela react to this, for example, these polls, because what we see regarding and with what is seen from the international standpoint regarding, for example, how population react to this kind of processes brings and has a lot of impact. So if we see that people begin to gain confidence in their own institutions, in these internal processes, this will have an echo on the international community, because this will help to change the opinion. And when you move towards and you change the opinion, then recognition and legitimacy come along.
Thank you, Yvonne, for your time and your important inputs here in this special From the South.
Thank you for the invitation.
It's always our